Hi everybody, welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. In this video, I want to talk about bookends because, this morning I woke up. It's Halloween, by the way. Happy Halloween. Unless you believe it's of the devil and satanic, then just have a happy day. But I was like trying to figure out what I was going to talk about today. And sometimes I run out of ideas. I look at emails and comments and I look at the news and stuff like that. And so in this case, it's been the first time in a while that I've looked at this certain series of news websites that I check. It's been a while. And I came across an interesting article that had to do with the eclipse and how there's a rabbi in Israel that talked about the eclipse that happened in Utah. Not referring specifically to Utah, but this recent eclipse. And one thing led to another, as many times it does. And I realized there are some really interesting things that have happened during President Nelson's presidency that seem to be, bookend events. So I have this picture pulled up. This is on ashleyfurniture.com. It's not a paid promotion. But just for those that don't have English as their first language, sometimes there's some of these obscure vocabulary words that are you don't really understand, you don't know. I came across that all the time on my mission, and it was annoying. But this is what a bookend is. It's these things right here that, hold up books on your shelf. And this is actually a perfect image. I'm glad that I found this one because I feel like this is like a perfect depiction of what this video is going to be about. Because I found many different things that actually come in threes. And in this picture, you have 3 books. So a bookend is kind of like you have the beginning of something, like say President Nelson's presidency. That's mostly what we're going to be talking about here. It's like the beginning of his presidency, something happens. At the end of his presidency, something happens, and that's the end. And in this case, there's some interesting things in the middle, like these series or sets of 3. For example, we're gonna revisit the asteroid idea, but we're gonna be looking at foxes and eclipses and things that President Nelson has said, and just some other really interesting things. When you put it all together, I feel like they're all related. So before we get into this, I have updated the Flood the Earth tracker, and we're at 7,197 copies of the Book of Mormon that have been shared. That's an additional 6 from the last time that I updated it. So keep it up. We're trying to get to 10,000. The channel goal for each person is try to at least share 10. If that happened, that would be pretty amazing. And just keep up the good work, everybody. Okay, so how did this come into being? Well, before we get into it, I forgot. I have a quick thing I want to share with you. This was shared to me by Green Tree, and she has a new quote to add to my Rising Generation spreadsheet. And I have heard this quote before. I just never thought until now to put it on my spreadsheet. So I'm going to take you directly to the source, and just so you can see it on the spreadsheet, this is actually now my most recent quote. It's for this year. Let's go to Church News. Okay, so the article was put out just a little while ago on the 17th of October. Press forward with faith. Elder and Sister Bednar tell Snow College students in Ephraim. Okay, and at the end, I'm sure you may have heard this before because I feel like I had heard this before. Let's see. It got rid of my highlights. Okay, but anyway, this is being, I think, published again in this article. Now, this quote is not from this year, but I don't know exactly when it took place. So that's why I have it under 2023 on my spreadsheet. But here's the quote. Elder Bednar shared that while he was at Rexburg, He sat by President Gordon B. Hinckley at a dinner one evening. President Hinckley said to him emphatically, quote, "David, this is going to be the greatest season in the history of the restored church." Then he continued, not speaking about me individually, but about our generation. "I only have one regret. I will not be here to see it, but you will." Now, after that, he clarifies partially what that means. You know, this greatest season in the history of the restored church. Elder Bednar said that a part of the season, okay, a part. So he's not talking about the whole thing, the whole of what President Hinckley meant, but a part. Elder Bednar said that a part of the season President Hinckley was referring to is the time in which we now live, when the church has 335 temples in operation, under construction, or announced, including one in Ephraim. Do we appreciate the season in which we live? And I don't know if we do. And I say that from a temple perspective because I feel like I personally should be going to the temple more. I'm sure a lot of you feel the same way. Now that we have so many temples and we're left with fewer and fewer excuses not to go, do we go? So there's a lot of work of salvation that can be done right now if we just make the effort to go. But aside from that, I do feel like President Hinckley was probably alluding to the second coming. And it's interesting that Elder Bednar says, not speaking about me individually. I don't know if Elder Bednar expects to be there. I wouldn't get discouraged about that. But whatever the case, that's what President Hinckley said. This generation, the greatest season in the history of the restored church. So take that as you will. Thank you, Green Tree, for this quote. Okay. So back to the main topic of this video. It started with this. I was looking at Israel 365 News. They have a section called Biblical News. It says, Rabbi, we are in the age of Ahab before redemption. In case you don't know what he's referring to, when Jews talk about redemption or the Gula or the final redemption, that's essentially referring to when the Messiah comes and it starts the 1,000 years of peace, which they call the Messianic era. They also call it the final redemption. So they're essentially talking about the second coming in the millennium. We are in the age of Ahab before the millennium, before the second coming. Okay, so let's see what he says really quick. Oh, this happens like this on Israel 365 when I try to zoom in. Okay. We need to come together in this time of distress so that not only during the war, not only during this time of grief, we can unite, but so that we can be united for all time, Rabbi Grossman said. He's referring to Jews, how Jews need to be united, which is really interesting because that's something that our church is really focused on right now, avoiding contention, becoming of one heart and one mind, becoming Zion. So as we become Zion, or we're attempting to become Zion, it looks like they are too. They're really focused on unity. And it's kind of a big deal because when you talk to Jews about why the Second Temple was destroyed and why the Romans came in and destroyed Jerusalem and that initiated the dispersion or the diaspora, they don't believe, obviously, that it's because they crucified Christ. They believe it's because they were not united, because you had all the different Jewish sects like the Essenes, Zealots, Pharisees, Sadducees. And so because they weren't united, God allowed the Romans to destroy them, which we know that's ultimately not why. It's because they rejected the Redeemer. But they are right that things go better when you are united. And so anyway, continuing, the nation of Israel is strong, and we're getting closer to redemption, or the second coming, he said. We will now have a difficult 6 months, but we will be approaching the month of Nisan, the month of Passover and redemption. This year, there will be a great redemption. What we are going through now is all the preparation for redemption. Our unity is to bless our Father as one and as one undivided nation. So I believe I have read before in the course of this channel that there is a belief that when the Messiah comes, it's going to be during the time of Passover. I think I saw that on Chabad.org. But so I think that's what he's referring to here. He's basically, I think he's basically saying, look, this is probably going to happen. These next 6 months are going to be hard because of the war, because that's the context in which he's talking. The need to come together because that's necessary for Messiah to come in their minds. And that around the time of Nisan, that's when they would expect Christ to come, or the Messiah to come. And hopefully he does. Hopefully it's before that, but I guess we'll see. So I just point this out because there has been a lot of messianic talk among Jews within recent years. There have been so many things going on. In fact, we're going to go over one of those things that they're really looking at, these foxes on the Temple Mount. But saw that, and then there was this other article, and this really caught my attention. The solar eclipse and the attack on Israel. Okay, now remember, this is the eclipse that went through Utah recently. This one right here. This is the same eclipse. In case you haven't seen my other videos, I better pull this up. This is the same eclipse that went through Utah and missed all the temples in Utah, except for one that's in operation, the Monticello, Utah temple. Okay, this is up now? Yes, it is. Okay. Let me pull up. Okay, we got temples and then Utah eclipse. Here we go. These are all the temples. And here is Utah. And these three red lines right here represent the path of totality for the eclipse. And you can see there are only two white place markers here. This one's the Monticello, Utah temple, and then this one is the Manti temple, but it's currently decommissioned for renovations. So the only temple in operation in Utah that was in the path of totality was the Monticello, Utah temple. And if you look at Utah and you look at all the temples that are there, this is the only path that the eclipse could take to miss all the temples, or the maximum number of temples. And I feel like there's something to that. And I feel like this is a set of three. You have the one in 2017, you have the one this year in 2023, and then we have the one coming up in April of 2024. All of which go over significant church sites, except for this one, other than just Utah itself. All of them seem to be specifically for our church because of where they go over. So when I see an article like this, the solar eclipse and the attack on Israel, yeah, it could be related. And it's interesting that the Jews, or at least some of them, would view it that way. So let me read what it says. As the horrific Hamas attack against Israel on Saturday captured the world's attention, an event with dire prophetic implications took place with little fanfare. A ring of fire solar eclipse passed over the United States. The eclipse was visible along a path covering parts of the United States, Mexico, and several countries in Central America and South America, beginning in Oregon at 9:13 a.m. and ending off the Atlantic coast of Brazil at 3:48 p.m. Eastern Time. Now, let's look at the calendar really quick. Let's just remind ourselves. So, the way that it worked out this year is you had the Feast of Tabernacles, which began on Saturday, the 30th of September, which this year, that coincided with the first day of General Conference. And then the second day of General Conference was on the second day of the Feast of Tabernacles, also known as Sukkot. So you had General Conference, and then a week later, on the 7th of October, that's when the attack occurred. And it was the 8th day of the Feast of Tabernacles. The way that they view it is that these first 7 days are essentially for the nations of the world. And during temple times, they would have sacrificed 70 bulls for the 70 nations of the world. But that the 8th day, known as Simchat Torah and also Shemini Atzeret, that's like an 8th day for the Jews, for the covenant people, like just for them and for God. And it's a day of celebration and happiness. And so it's interesting that that's the day that Hamas chose to attack, which has now turned it into a day of sadness. It's going to be interesting how they celebrate it in these upcoming years, because it's supposed to be a day of joy and celebration. And now it's essentially been stained. Of course, well, because never mind. I was going to say our calendar versus their calendar, but no, they're always going to view it as having happened on Simchat Torah. So anyway, General Conference, and then Simchat Torah, or the 8th day of the Feast of Tabernacles, and then a week after that, that's when you had the eclipse. So these 3 Saturdays, you had these big events happen: General Conference, as well as the Feast of Tabernacles, Simchat Torah, and then the attack on Israel, and then a week later, the eclipse that goes over Utah. It's very strange how that lines up, but it does. All right, going back here, there's some more. The next solar eclipse to pass over the U.S. will be on the 8th of April, 2024, when a total solar eclipse will pass over Mexico, the United States, and Canada. Okay. Later on, astronomical phenomena are often discussed in Jewish literature as accompanying the Messiah. In its discussion of eclipses, the Talmud, Sukkot 29a, specifically describes solar eclipses as being a bad omen for the nations that base their calendars on the solar cycle. At the end of this section, describing the omens contained within eclipses, the Talmud states a disclaimer, quote, "When Israel does the will of the place, or God, they have nothing to fear from all this," end quote, citing the prophet Jeremiah as a source. Jeremiah 10:2. "Thus said Hashem," or the Lord, or Jehovah, or Yahweh. It literally means the name. "Thus said the Lord, do not learn to go the way of the nations, and do not be dismayed by portents in the sky. Let the nations be dismayed by them." The same source in the Talmud specifies that lunar eclipses are a bad omen for Israel, since Israel is spiritually represented by the moon. If the lunar eclipse takes place in the east side of the heavens, then it is a bad omen for all the nations in the east. And similarly, if it occurs in the western hemisphere of the sky, it is a bad sign for all the nations in the west. Okay, later on, Rabbi Yosef Berger emphasized that as horrific as the attack was, it was undeniable a precursor to redemption, or the second coming. Quote, "What they did to the children of Israel is horrible, and they will be judged by Hashem, of course. But the other nations will be judged by how they react, whether they will call evil for what it is, or whether they confuse light and darkness by condemning Israel. The eclipse should have been a reminder that ultimate power lies with the armies of God, which are the forces of nature. When he brings judgment, there is no hiding from him or fighting against him." And that's true. It's interesting to view this Jewish perspective of the eclipse. All right, later, quote, this is still Rabbi Berger, "The Messiah from the house of David is like the moon, which is hidden, but suddenly appears at Rosh Chodesh, which means the beginning of the month, the head of the month. It's like the first of the month on the Hebrew, because their months are lunar months. And so when it's a full moon, or wait, I don't know if it's a new moon or a full moon. I can't remember. But one of those initiates the new month on the Hebrew calendar. So they're saying that the Messiah is like the first day of the month when the moon suddenly appears. The Mashiach is in the world awaiting to be revealed, Rabbi Berger said. It is like turning down the lights in a theater before the final act of the play begins. Rabbi Berger noted that the timing of the events was significant. Quote, "This came after the Jews did 51 days of teshuvah, or repentance, from Rosh Hashanah to Simchat Torah. This could not possibly have been a judgment against Israel. This was the nations trying to prevent the Jews from celebrating the Torah." The rabbi described a concept in Chassidus, which is called Hamtakat Hadinim, sweetening of the judgments, which describes how difficult things are ultimately counted as meritorious. Quote, "The sages teach that before any growth, there has to be a contraction. Before a seed sprouts, the fruit must die and rot. This is especially true just before the Gula, or the final redemption, or the second coming," Rabbi Berger said. "What we just witnessed was a replay of Pharaoh throwing Jewish babies into the Nile. They attacked babies. Before the resurrection of the dead must come horrible things such as the war of Gog and Magog." So it's interesting. It's interesting to hear what they're saying. It's interesting to see that they're taking note of this eclipse as well, and that they view the timing as interesting, and they really just have heightened expectations that the second coming is going to happen soon. From their point of view, the redemption or the Gula or the coming of Messiah for the first time. So I was looking at my second coming timeline, where I'm keeping track of events that have already occurred so that I don't forget about them. And so I can refer back to it by putting the sources over here in column R. And I was thinking about the fact that, I was going back here and I was just kind of like looking through, and I saw President Nelson's birthday. And then I remembered this blue supermoon that took place 9 days before he turned 99. And I was thinking about what he said recently, how it seemed to be a bookend to what he said at the beginning of his presidency. So like all these like thoughts started kind of like rushing in. So, and that's how I put together this thing. So let's go to the year 2018. And this was in January. Now I'm looking at the April 2018 ensign, and this article is called "As We Go Forward Together," but this was given in January, right after President Nelson became president of the church. Here it is right here. Delivered these remarks on January 16th, 2018, during a live broadcast from the annex of the Salt Lake Temple. Okay, so 2 days after he became president of the church, on January 16th, that's when this was said. Okay, let me go down to the part. He says, "As a new presidency, we want to begin with the end in mind. For this reason, we're speaking to you today from a temple. The end for which each of us strives is to be endowed with power in the house of the Lord, sealed as families, faithful to covenants made in a temple that qualify us for the greatest gift of God, that of eternal life. The ordinances of the temple and the covenants you make there are key to strengthening your life, your marriage, and your family, and your ability to resist the attacks of the adversary. Your worship in the temple and your service there for your ancestors will bless you with increased personal revelation and peace, and will fortify your commitment to stay on the covenant path." Okay, so he made this statement, and then in this most recent general conference, in his talk called Think Celestial, he said this: In my first message as president of the church, I encouraged you to begin with the end in mind. This means making the celestial kingdom your eternal goal, and then carefully considering where each of your decisions while here on earth will place you in the next world. Now, it's interesting to note, let me pull this up. It's interesting to note that this was the the only general conference during his presidency where he only spoke one time. And the amount of times that he's spoken has decreased. Okay. So if we go over to this over here, you can see that starting with his first general conference, he spoke 5 times, and then 4, 3, 4, 5, and then 4, 4, 3, 3, 3, 2, and then 1 with this most recent conference. So I don't know if he's close to leaving us. I tend to think that he'll be around and be one of the first ones that are changed from mortality to being resurrected. As you know, I've expressed that many times. But what I want to focus on is, could it be that this is it? That we're getting close to the end? You know, we have this very unusual war happening in Israel that has a lot of potential to escalate and become a regional war, maybe even the Third World War. This may actually be the War of Gog and Magog, or at least the beginnings of it. And we might be at the end, and that may have been a bookmark, right? So he says this at the very beginning, and then he reminds us at the very end. There's other bookmarks, it would seem. Let me show you. So with that in mind, let's go back to this idea of the eclipses. So we had this one that took place in 2017. This was just a few months before he became president of the church. So this would be the beginning bookmark if we're looking at eclipses as bookmarks. This is the one that went over Independence, Missouri, and Adirondack in far west. Okay. All very, very, very significant sites. And then in the middle, not in the middle, but between 2017 and 2014, we have this eclipse that just took place that went through Utah that we were just talking about. Also a significant place in the church, Utah. That's currently where church headquarters is. And then next year, we have this one. And it's going to come the day after General Conference. It's going to go over the Sacred Grove, where God the Father and Jesus Christ appeared. It's going to go over Kirtland, Ohio, where the place of the first temple of this dispensation, in a place where Christ appeared, and as well as Old Testament prophets. So all 3 of these eclipses seem to be a message, I think, to our church. And it certainly feels like they could be summarized as this: 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. I don't know that, but we'll see. Now, before you type it, stop. I know about the Aleph and Tav eclipses and that whole theory. Basically, it goes like this, that these 3 eclipses, when you put them together, they make the letter Aleph in Hebrew, not in the modern Hebrew block script, but in Paleo Hebrew or Phoenician. And the other one, the Tav, in Paleo Hebrew looks like an X, and there's going to be another one by the Middle East. I don't put too much stock into that because I think it's going to happen sooner than that, but we'll just have to wait and see. It is interesting to note, however. So anyway, so you have this bookend, or this series of 3, 1, 2, 3, the eclipses. So that's interesting. You have President Nelson's, begin with the ending in mind, and then begin with the ending in mind at the end. Okay. There's also this very interesting fact right here. Okay, this is from NASA. Super blue blood moon coming January 31st. This is January 31st of 2018 over here. Okay. So if we go to my spreadsheet, we go down to 2018, just so that you can visualize it. Okay, here we are. Zoom in. So on the 14th, President Nelson becomes president of the church. And 17 days later, there's a super blue blood moon, which is a supermoon, a blue moon, and a blood moon lunar eclipse all at the same time. Very rare event. It's pretty rare. Let's read what the article says. Okay, let me zoom in. The January 31st full moon is special for 3 reasons. It's the third of a series of supermoons when the moon is closer to the Earth in its orbit, known as perigee, or perigee. I don't know. I think it's perigee. And about 14% brighter than usual. It's also the second full moon of the month, commonly known as a blue moon. The supermoon will pass through Earth's shadow to give viewers in the right location a total lunar eclipse. While the moon is in the Earth's shadow, it will take on a reddish tint known as a blood moon. Okay, so that's kind of strange that happened right after he became president of the church. In the same month and 17 days later, which remember, he's the 17th president of the church, and we've talked about all the 17s. Not going to do it again here. Just do a search for 17 on my channel. I've done videos about it. So the way that it worked out is, so you had the 2 full moons in January, which made it a blue moon. Okay. Now the next month was February, which only had 28 days, and there was no full moon in the month of February. And so in the next month, the way that it worked out in March, there was another blue moon. So 2 full moons in March. So for a total of 13 full moons in the year 2018. Okay. So keep that in mind. We'll get back to that in just a minute. Okay. Now on Halloween, interestingly, Halloween of 2020, that's when the next blue moon was in President Nelson's presidency. Halloween full moon, come see October's blue moon tonight, October 31st, 2020. An interesting year for that to happen. We all know what happened in 2020. So for a blue moon, the next blue moon to show up in that year is interesting. It says here, a blue moon seems rare. A full moon on Halloween across all time zones is even more rare, an event that hasn't occurred since 1944. So it was rare for that reason, but so there was that. And then we have this. So this article updated August 28th, 2023, so just a couple months ago. How rare is the super blue moon appearing in skies later this week? So let's go to this. Let's go up here. So this is the one right here in row 27. This is the one that happened just 9 days before President Nelson turned 99 on 9/9, meaning September 9th. 9/9, 99 years old, 9 days before he turns 99. That's weird. It's weird. So this is now the third blue moon of his presidency. And this is just before or shortly before General Conference. General Conference is like a month later, where he gives that bookend. Okay. So the third blue moon, or sorry, not the third blue moon. Let me explain it like this. Let me go to this right here. So there's these two websites. I'm going to show you this concept on this website, but I just want to verify for you on inthesky.org that they have the same thing. They have the same dates. This is a list of blue moons. Okay. It's just that with websites like this that look basic, I always want to be a little bit like even more careful and make sure that that they have right information, because it looks, just basic. Okay. So we're going to think about this in terms of years, not full moons or not blue moons. You'll remember there were 2 blue moons in 2018 for a total of 13 full moons that year. So whenever there's a blue moon in that year, you have 13 full moons. Okay. Usually there's 1 full moon per month, but whenever there's a blue moon, then you have an extra full moon for that year. So think of this in terms of years. In President Nelson's presidency so far, there have been 3 years that have had 13 full moons. 2018, 2020, and now this year, 2023. Okay? So going back to this. So we've had 3 blue moon years. Let's just call it like that. 3 blue moon years. So again, looking at this, 1, 2, 3, during President Nelson's presidency. Okay. So what does this say? August opened with a bright full moon that, while beautiful, created a bit of a headache for hopeful meteor shower viewers. But on Wednesday night, August 30th, another full moon will light up the skies in a rare phenomenon called a super blue moon. This special event is the coincidence of 2 uncommon moon traits: a supermoon, which occurs when the moon appears larger than usual, and a blue moon, or the second full moon in a month. According to NASA, a blue moon only occurs once every 2 or 3 years on average, and a blue moon that is also a supermoon is even rarer. While a blue supermoon can occasionally happen twice within 2 months, and that's exactly what happened in 2018. You had 2 super blue moon. Wait, is that what happened? Sorry, let me go back and check. Let's go back to 2018. I can't remember if the blue moon in March, if it was also, no, it was just a blue moon. Okay, so at the beginning of his presidency, 17 days after he became president of the church, it was a super blue blood moon. And then the one 2 months later in March was just a blue moon. It was not a super blue moon. Okay. So while a super blue moon can occasionally happen twice within 2 months, at other times, it could be 20 years before the phenomenon repeats. On average, such an event occurs once per decade per the agency. Okay? So this one that happened this year, 9 days before he turned 99 on 9/9, this is a rare thing to happen. A super blue moon. The last time that it did happen was in January of 2018, 17 days after he became president of the church. Okay, and then later on in this article, it notes, in another rare event in January 2018, a supermoon and a blue moon overlapped with a lunar eclipse, creating a large looking rust-colored moon. So they take note of what happened in 2018. Okay, so that's our next set. So just as a reminder, we had President Nelson's 2 statements about beginning with the end in mind. You had those 2 bookends. You have the 3 eclipses, 1, 2, 3. Now we have these 3 years of blue moons, 2 of which seem to correspond directly with President Nelson because of their proximity to important things. Like I said, 17 days after he became president of the church, you had the super blue blood moon. And then 9 days on the other bookend, 9 days before he turned 99 on 9/9, there was a super blue moon. So that's the next set of bookends. Okay, now let's turn to the next thing. Now we have these foxes appearing on the Temple Mount. Foxes appear on Temple Mount in time to fulfill verse in Lamentations read on 9th of Av. So this first one happened in 2019. This was President Nelson's second year as president of the church. So here's the first bookend when it comes to these foxes. And there's three. At least when I say there's three, there's been 3 times reported in the news. I don't know, maybe there's been other times that foxes have been seen there, but it's a rare sight. So I'm going off of these 3 reports. And that's all that really matters because, again, when it comes to signs, what really matters is the audience and the message that's being delivered. So these are the 3 big times that people have thought about foxes on the Temple Mount. Okay, so an article on Breaking Israel News published 2 days ago about foxes being sighted on the Temple Mount has already garnered over 250,000 reads, leading one influential rabbi to note that the phenomenon coupled with the reaction are sure signs that, quote, more prophecies are on the way, end quote. The sighting comes during the 9-day period of austerity, culminating in the 9th of Av, when Jews read the Book of Lamentations, which includes a verse about foxes on the Temple Mount. By the way, because I don't think it explains it here. Well, it does later. Let me just let you know right now. If you don't know what the 9th of Av is one of the months on the Hebrew calendar, and the 9th of Av is a day of sadness. It's almost like the exact opposite of Simchat Torah when Hamas attacked. That's like a happy day during the year. The 9th of Av is a day of grief because Jewish tradition holds that's when both the first and the second temples were destroyed on that day. And also other things in Jewish history, like things having to do with the Holocaust and the Spanish Inquisition and stuff like that. So it's significant. They associate this day with grief and disaster. And it's interesting with what's happening this year because 2 of these sightings have been this year, and one of them was on the 9th of Av. So we'll get to that. Okay. The article, the most read Breaking Israel News article of the year, reports, that's what Israel's 365 used to be called, Breaking Israel News. The article, the most read Breaking Israel News article of the year, reports that visitors to the area of the Temple Mount observed a group of about a dozen foxes in the southwestern area of the Western Wall for the last 3 days in the early hours of the day. The image of foxes on the Temple Mount was described in the Book of Lamentations, which some biblical scholars believe was written by the prophet Jeremiah. Lamentations 5:18. Because of Mount Zion, which lies desolate, jackals prowl over it. The Hebrew word used in this verse is most accurately translated as foxes. This verse appears in the 5th and final chapter of Lamentations, which culminates in the prophecy that Jerusalem will return to its former days of glory. Lamentations 5:22. For truly you have rejected us, bitterly raged against us. Take us back, Hashem, or the Lord, to yourself, and let us come back. Renew our days as of old. It is important to note that this sighting occurs during the 9-day period of austerity preceding Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of the Hebrew month of Av, on which the Jews fast and mourn for the destruction of the first and second temples, which were both destroyed on that day. Part of the Tisha B'Av service is a public reading of the Book of Lamentations. Rabbi Yosef Berger, the rabbi of King David's tomb on Mount Zion, emphasized that the huge interest in what is ostensibly a minor event is, in itself, an essential element of Gula, or redemption, or the second coming, in the millennium. Quote, so many people look at the video and see nothing. but it is truly a blessed sign of the times that so many more Jews and non-Jews look at the video and see signs of Gula, Rabbi Berger said. God is hidden, but his greatest joy is when we seek him out and find him. That is when Gula happens. The rabbi noted that the ability to see redemption in the appearance of foxes on the Temple Mount was specifically described in a section of the Talmud, which was written 2,000 years ago. The Talmud, Makot 24b, wrote about how Rabban Gamliel, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Joshua, and Rabbi Akiva went up to Jerusalem. The others started weeping, but Rabbi Akiva laughed. When they reached the Temple Mount, they saw a fox emerging from the place of the Holy of Holies. So, just to be clear, this is a story about after the temple was destroyed by the Romans and Jerusalem was destroyed. So the story is you have these rabbis that went to the Temple Mount. They saw a fox coming out from the place where the Holy of Holies was. The others started weeping, but Rabbi Akiva laughed. Rabbi Akiva asked the rabbis why they cried, and they explained that to see a wild animal in such a holy place, a place which was forbidden for unfit men, was distressing. Rabbi Akiva noted that this was precisely the reason he laughed. He explained that the fact that the prophecy of Uriah, related by the prophet Micah, had come to be was proof that the prophecy of Zechariah would also come to be. The prophet Micah described the total destruction of Jerusalem. Assuredly, because of you, Zion shall be plowed as a field, and Jerusalem shall become heaps of ruins, and the Har Habayit a shrine in the woods. From Micah 3:2. The prophet Zechariah described the return of Jerusalem to its days of glory. Thus said the Lord of hosts, there shall yet be old men and women in the squares of Jerusalem, each with staff in hand because of their great age. And the squares of the city shall be crowded with boys and girls playing in the squares. Quote from Rabbi Berger, that the Talmud and the Book of Lamentations are not allegories. The simple meaning is that the appearance of foxes on the Temple Mount specifically is a key element that opens the way for more prophecies to come to be. Most specifically, Jerusalem returning to its former glory. This does not mean that Jerusalem will become a beautiful city. We've had that for over 50 years. The real glory of Jerusalem is embodied on the Temple Mount in the temple as a house of prayer for all nations. Okay, so you get it. So they basically view it as prophecy coming to pass, that the Lord said, the temple's going to be destroyed. It's going to become like a wilderness. Foxes are going to be there. But that would happen first. And then after that, there would be the redemption of Jerusalem. And so it's like a sign that, okay, this part's over. Now comes the next part, the redemption of Jerusalem and the building of the temple. Okay, so you see why that's important. Okay, so there's a video you can watch. You can see the foxes right here. It's kind of blurry right here, but this is on YouTube. I'll put the link in the description below in case you want to watch it. You can also look it up on X and just look up Temple Mount foxes and you'll find videos there. So that was the first time. The first one, and I've searched. The first article that's come out about this was in 2019, President Nelson's second year as president of the church. And then this year, and by the way, and remember, that was during the 9 days leading up to the 9th of Av. So it wasn't on the 9th of Av, but it was during that 9-day period. Okay, now the next one, foxes on Mount Zion bring biblical Book of Lamentations to life. This was January 17th of all days of this year. So the second time this happened was January of this year. A rare sighting of a fox running across Mount Zion conjured up images described in the Book of Lamentations Tuesday morning. Jewish tradition teaches that the appearance of foxes on the Temple Mount is proof that the third temple shall be rebuilt. Quote, I only saw one fox, but I assume that there are more in the area, said Joshua Wander, a resident of the Mount of Olives, who spotted the animal running through the cemetery. Continuing, he says, it is definitely unusual to see them. That's why I filmed it. It's something that I rarely see. Maybe it's a sign. Okay, and then here's a video here that you can watch, and there's the fox right there. It's kind of hard to see. I think that's like the white tip of its tail. I'm not sure, but there's like its ears right here. So it's like going up these steps. Okay, so this is the second time, number 2. And then the third time. On the third time, prophecy fulfilled, foxes spotted in Jerusalem's old city on 9th of Av. So this is weird. Let's go back to this. So when we're thinking about those blue moons, we had the first one that seemed to relate specifically to President Nelson and him becoming president of the church. The one in the middle was just kind of nondescript. It was on Halloween. As far as I can tell, had nothing to do with President Nelson in any way. Nothing significant was going on with President Nelson at that time, I don't think. But then the third one was President Nelson specific. It was 9 days before he turned 99. So you have the bookends that related to President Nelson. And with these foxes, you have the bookends that are related to the 9th of Av. The first one was during the 9-day period, but then the last bookend, the third one, was on the 9th of Av, which is really interesting because it's this year that the war of Gog and Magog may have started. Isn't it weird and interesting how that plays out? So let's go back here. This was July 27th of this year, just a few months before this war started. Here's an image of the fox at the Temple Mount. In a clear sign of the imminent rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem, a fox was spotted near the Zion Gate in the Old City on the evening of Tisha B'Av, the day commemorating the destruction of the 2 temples. The fox was photographed by Barak Blumenthal as he toured the city on the auspicious day. While not miraculous, foxes generally avoid cities in populated areas. Indeed, the sighting comes when Jerusalem was full of people coming to commemorate the day. In 2019, several foxes were spotted on the Temple Mount during the 9 days of austerity leading up to the 9th of Av. I think that's all I have for this one. Okay, so here's another set of 3. So we have the eclipses, we have the blue moons, and then we have the foxes. And then let's move on to the next thing. And by the way, the Jerusalem Post also talked about this. I didn't pull up every article. I just pulled up the ones that were the most convenient. So the next set of 3 are these asteroids. And I've done a video about this that not a whole lot of people watched for some reason, but it was a really good video. But here you go. We're going to do it again. There are 3 sets of 3 asteroids that pass by Earth on important days. And I'm about to show you. Okay, so the first set of 3 happened on September 20th, or this article is on September 20th, 2022. Let's see. Yeah, and they passed by on September 20th. So let's go to hebcal.com. Let's change it over to, let's do Gregorian calendar 2022. Show Hebrew dates. Okay, create calendar. I already forgot. What was it? Oh, yeah, it was September. Sorry, I got to go back here. September 20th. Here we go. September 20th, 2022. So September 20th of 2022 was exactly 1 week before Rosh Hashanah. Remember, Rosh Hashanah is a 2-day holiday, and it's the Jewish New Year. It means head of the year. Rosh, head, ha, the, Shana, year, head of the year. So 1 week before Rosh Hashanah, you had 3 asteroids to pass Earth. One to fly closer to planet than normal. And that's an important detail. I'll show you why. 3 asteroids are set to pass the Earth on Tuesday, September 20th, one of which is the size of a bridge, and the other 2 being twice the lengths of a London bus, according to NASA's asteroid tracker. Though they likely won't impact the planet, one of these asteroids is still coming noticeably closer than average. Okay, and then here's the names of the asteroids. 2022 SC1, 2022 SW1, and 2022 SH. Okay? So that's what happened 1 week before Rosh Hashanah last year. And then 3 giant asteroids will have a close encounter with Earth on Christmas Day. And this is from Newsweek. Christmas Day of 2022. I'll remind you that on Christmas Day in 2022, Christmas was on the same day as the 8th day of Hanukkah, the day when they light the final candle on the menorah. So as we were celebrating Christmas, they were completing the menorah by lighting the 8th candle. And there was also an 8-planet alignment that day, or a planetary octet, or a planetary parade. So you had that going on. The 2 coinciding, Christmas and the 8th day of Hanukkah, as well as a 8 planetary parade octet alignment in the sky. And on that same day, this happened. Not 1, not 2, but 3 huge asteroids are paying us a holiday visit and are due to speed relatively near the Earth on Christmas Day. Relative to distances in the universe, that is, so there's no reason to panic. The 3 asteroids are named 2022 YL1, 2013 YA14, and 2022 TE14, and are estimated to measure between 124 and 278 feet, between 167 and 360 feet, and between 312 and 689 feet in diameter, respectively. Therefore, 2022 YL1 is around the same size as the wingspan of a Boeing 777. 2013 YA14 is similar in scale to an American football field, while 2022 TE14 will be around the same size as a 50-story building. We call them asteroids A, B, and C, respectively. And that's actually it for this article, all that I want to share. Okay, so the day before, or the week before Rosh Hashanah in 2022, the day of Christmas, and the 8th day of Hanukkah, and the planetary alignment in 2022. And then on Yom Kippur this year, Yom Kippur is the Day of Atonement. It's the holiest day on the Hebrew calendar. And this is from Jerusalem Post. Judgment Day. 3 asteroids fly past Earth on Yom Kippur. Isn't that weird? Let's read the details and then let's talk about it. 3 asteroids passed by Earth on Monday, September 25th, the day of Yom Kippur, and one of them was flying unusually close to the planet's surface. Remember that detail with that first set of 3, the week before Rosh Hashanah? You had 3 that flew by, 1 was unusually close. And then the same thing happens this year on Yom Kippur. So again, let's look at our bookend right here. So you had the first set of 3 a week before Rosh Hashanah. one of which was unusually close to the earth. The one in the middle was Christmas Day and the 8th day of Hanukkah and the 8 planetary alignment. And then the third one, the other side of the bookend, was on Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the Hebrew calendar, and one of the asteroids was unusually close, just like that first set of 3. Isn't that weird? When we look at the calendar right here, let's go to 2023. Well, so first we had, again, just so you can visualize it. So we're looking at September 2022. So we had this one right here before Rosh Hashanah. And then a couple months later on the 25th, which was Christmas, the 25th of December, Christmas and Hanukkah, 8 candles and the planetary alignment of 8 planets. And then the next year, this year, 2023, we have, so we have, here's Rosh Hashanah and then Yom Kippur right here. This is the day that the last 3 asteroids pass by Earth on Yom Kippur. And then Saturday of that week, that's when the Feast of Tabernacles started. That was also the first day of conference. And then a week after that, you have the war that started on the 7th of October. So you had these, like the article said in the Jerusalem Post, you had Judgment Day asteroids on Yom Kippur. And then, very possibly, the War of Gog and Magog starting the week after that. It was the week after that. Look, Yom Kippur, a week after. Here you go. That is so weird. Okay, so let's go back here. And then here's the name of the asteroids: 2023 SP3, 2023 ST2, 2023 SZ. I'm saying the names of the asteroids so you can see that they're all 9 of them are different asteroids. It's not like a repeat or anything like that. They're all different. So, gosh, it's so weird. It's so weird. And then let's just end it with this. This isn't exactly the same thing, but it's an interesting time for this to happen. Okay. This was in September. Okay. This is the month where you had the Judgment Day asteroids on Yom Kippur. A first for the Church of Jesus Christ. 3 temples to be dedicated on same day, Sunday, September 17th. And we have that here. Go to the very top. First time in world history, 3 temples on the same day. And by the way, that day was Rosh Hashanah. It was Rosh Hashanah too. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are known as the high holidays. Yom Kippur is the holiest day, but Rosh Hashanah is like right there with it. They're connected. The 10 days that connect those 2 holidays are called the days of awe. And it's a very serious time during the year. And that's when we dedicated these 3 temples. Moses Lake, Washington Temple, which now for the first time I'm thinking that's interesting that you have Moses' name in the name of this temple. Bentonville Lake, Arkansas Temple, and Brasilia, Brazil Temple. So there you go. Who knows? Who knows if it has meaning or not? But I tend to think that it does. I think it's very unlikely that you would have all these these 3s and these bookends happening. So one more time, you have President Nelson's beginning with the end in mind at the beginning and at the end. Well, we don't know if it's the end of his presidency, but assuming that the second coming is soon, it's relatively close to the end before the second coming. So you have that. And then you have the 3 eclipses, 2017, 2023, 2024. And again, the ones on each end are the ones that go over those very specific church sites, whereas the one in the middle, the one that just happened this month in Utah, it was a little bit different in character because it didn't go over like a specific church site like the other two do. But you have the eclipses, you have the blue moon years, right? The one in the middle is just kind of generic, but the ones on the ends seem to be related to President Nelson. And then you have the foxes, with the last one, the third one being on the 9th of Av, in the year that the war starts, potentially the war of Gog and Magog. And then you have the 3 sets of 3 asteroids, these two on the ends matching each other because one of them flew unusually close to Earth, with the one in the middle, the set of 3 in the middle being on Christmas and the 8th day of Hanukkah. And then you have these 3 temples. So I just want to point that out to you for your consideration. I do tend to see these as signs in having meaning, and I don't think that we should ignore them, especially given the fact that it seems like we're at the end of these bookends. You know, it's not like we're in the middle or at the beginning. At the beginning, we didn't even know that it was a bookend because it's the first time that some of these things are happening. But now that it's happened 3 times with these different things, I would take that seriously. Maybe it's an indication as to where we're at. Okay, well, that's going to be it for this one. So if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also, make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.